The meltdown at Moonbeam Toys. It began, as world-shifting discoveries often do, with a public tantrum of seismic proportions. My 2-year-old daughter, Evie, was a hurricane of strawberry blonde curls and sheer will, lying prostrate on the grubby floor of Moonbeam Toys. The crime? I had gently denied her a glittery unicorn horn that, in my view, offered no practical value. My arsenal of parental platitudes was exhausted. "I love you, sweetie. Please stop. We need to use our words." They bounced off her like Nerf darts off a tank. It was in that moment of desperate, silent pleading, my cheeks burning under the judgmental stares of other parents, that a frail, elderly woman with kind eyes and a lavender cardigan leaned down, not to Evie, but to me. She whispered 5 words that felt like a key sliding into a lock I never knew existed. "Let me help you, please." Evie's wails hiccuped to a stop. She looked at the woman, then at me, her big blue eyes wide with surprise. The storm had passed, not with a command, but with an invitation. I bought the unicorn horn, but I left the store with something far more valuable. The first word. 1. Look, and the world widens. The secret began with a spiderweb. Not a metaphor. A real, dewy, masterfully engineered spiderweb, strung between the bristles of our backyard broom. A week had passed since the great moonbeam meltdown and the whisper from the woman in lavender. Her 5 words were a puzzle box in my mind, and I had decided to start with the simplest, most obvious one. Look. It felt ridiculous. I already said look 100 times a day. Look both ways. Look at this mess. Look at me when I'm talking to you. It was a command, a warning, a punctuation of frustration. It held no magic. Evie, my 2-year-old hurricane, was in the garden, her mission clear, to transfer every fistful of dirt from the flower bed onto the clean patio stones. My mission was to stop her. The old script played in my head. "Evie, no. Don't throw the dirt. See? You're making a mess." I took a breath, the lavender woman's calm in my memory. I changed the script. I didn't tell her to stop. I didn't say, "See." I got down on my knees in the grass, my eyes level with hers, and I pointed not at the dirt in her hand, but at the forgotten broom leaning against the fence. "Evie," I said, my voice a stage whisper of genuine discovery. "Look." Her chubby fist paused, mid-throw. Her brow, furrowed in determined destruction, smoothed. She followed my pointing finger. "What is that?" I murmured, scooting closer to the broom, not to her. My curiosity was real now. The morning sun had caught the web just so, turning it into a necklace of tiny diamonds. She dropped the dirt. With the solemn gravity of a scientist approaching a rare specimen, she toddled over. She crouched beside me, her overalls brushing the damp grass. Together, we stared. "Look at the strings," I whispered. "They're like tiny ropes." I traced a line in the air near it. "And look in the middle, see the little spiral? It's a trap. 4 fairy airplanes." She leaned in, her breath fogging the air. "Bug," she stated. "Yes. A very clever bug made this. While we were sleeping." I pointed to a single drop of dew quivering at the edge. "Look. The web is holding a piece of the morning." She was utterly still. The child who could not sit through a single page of a board book was holding a 5-minute vigil for an arachnid's architecture. The world had shrunk to this 1 square foot of wonder. No demands, no corrections, just a shared, breathless look. That was the key. I wasn't directing her gaze to control her. I was inviting it to join mine. I was saying, what you find fascinating is worth my full attention too. We became hunters of the extraordinary ordinary after that. Our walks were no longer about reaching a destination. They were archaeological digs in the present moment. "Look," I'd gasp, stopping dead on the sidewalk. She'd freeze, anticipating wonder. I'd point at a storm drain. The shiny penny. It fell right through the world. We'd both peer into the darkness, imagining its journey. "Look," she'd shout, her fingers stabbing the air, mastering the word. I'd follow her command and see a cloud shaped like a grumpy turtle, a painted rock hiding under a bush, the mesmerizing spin of a ceiling fan in a store. "Look, Mama," she'd whisper, pulling my sleeve in the supermarket, pointing at an elderly man's intricately laced boots. He caught us staring, and I braced for awkwardness. But I just smiled and said, "We're just looking. They're wonderful boots." He stood a little taller. The power of look was the power of validation. It was the foundation of all learning, the silent scream of, "You are not alone in your astonishment. I am astonished with you." It made me a student in her world. She wasn't just my toddler. She was my tiny, brilliant tour guide to a universe I had forgotten how to see. A universe where a crack in the pavement wasn't a flaw, but a throne for a brave, yellow dandelion. And as I knelt there with her, day after day, following the direction of her chubby finger, I realized something profound. She wasn't just showing me spiders and pennies. She was teaching me how to see her. Not as a problem to be managed, but as a person to be discovered. The first word wasn't a tool. It was a telescope, and at the other end, waiting to be seen in all her infinite, fascinating detail, was my daughter. 2. Help, the architect of independence. The crisis arrived on a Tuesday morning in the form of a single, stubborn, polka-dotted sock. I was late. Evie was dawdling. The great daily migration from our cozy cave of an apartment to the car was stalling, as it always did, in the glacial space between the bedroom and the front door. Today's obstacle was footwear. She sat on the floor, a small philosopher queen surrounded by rejected shoes, holding one sock as if it were a dead mouse. "Evie, please.
Put your sock on.
We have to go." She looked at the sock. She looked at me. She dropped it. Frustration, that familiar hot coal, settled in my chest. The old instincts roared. Just do it for her. Grab her foot, wrestle it on, be done. It was faster. It was efficient. It was the parent's prerogative. But the memory of the spiderweb, of the shared, quiet look, held me back. Doing it for her felt like a betrayal of that new partnership. That's when the second word, the one that felt most unnatural to my tired, controlling brain, floated up. Help. I took a breath that tasted like surrender. I didn't reach for her foot. Instead, I sank down beside her, picked up the orphan sock, and held it in my own hands with an expression of pure, theatrical bewilderment. "Oh, no," I sighed, my voice heavy with a shared problem. "This sock is so lost. It doesn't know where its home is." Her eyes flicked from my face to the sock. A flicker of interest. "I don't think I can do this by myself," I continued, shaking my head. "Evie, I really need some help." It was as if I'd spoken a magic password.
Her posture changed.
The slump of defiance straightened into the alertness of a knight receiving a quest. She didn't say yes. She simply reached out, took the sock from my hands with newfound gravity, and examined it. "Home is foot," she stated. "You're so right," I whispered. "Can you help it find its way?" What followed wasn't fast. It was a painstaking, clumsy ballet. She struggled, the elastic fighting her small hands. She put it on backward, then inside out. My palms itched to intervene, to fix it. But I bit my tongue. This wasn't about the sock anymore. It was about the sacred contract of the word help. When the sock was finally, triumphantly, crookedly in place, she looked at me, and the pride on her face was a physical light. She had not been managed. She had been needed. We became a company of two after that. Help was our secret handshake, our corporate motto. I stopped being the director of operations and became the CEO in need of a very vital vice president. "The laundry basket is so heavy. Can you help me push it?" She would throw her entire 25-pound body against it, grunting with effort, moving at a millimeter. A monumental success. I can't remember where the blue blocks go. I need help sorting them. Our cleanup became a mission of galactic importance. The magic of help was its sublime inversion. It took her burning, toddler-sized desire for autonomy and power and channeled it into the heart of the family machine. It transformed a demand, set the table, into a vital alliance. "I need your help getting the spoons to their families." One afternoon, a true disaster struck. A full bag of groceries gave way in the driveway. sending a dozen oranges rolling in a humiliating, citrusy flood toward the storm drain. A wave of pure, adult frustration washed over me. I let out a groan. Before I could even move, I felt a small, steady pressure on my leg. I looked down. Evie had walked over, wrapped her arms around my knee, and laid her cheek against me. She looked up, her face solemn. "Help, Mama," she said. She didn't scramble for oranges. She offered an anchor. And in that moment, I understood the word's deepest dimension. Help wasn't just about tasks. It was about solidarity. It was the antidote to isolation. My tiny vice president wasn't just learning to put on socks or sort blocks. She was learning to see when someone was swamped and to offer her strength, however small. I hugged her back, the frustration melting. "Yes, sweetie," I said, my voice thick. "Thank you. Let's help each other." We gathered every last orange, a team of 2. She taught me that day that the greatest help isn't always in the completion of the chore, but in the unwavering presence beside you, reminding you that you don't have to face the spilled chaos of the world alone. 3. Guess, the gateway to 1,000 whys. It started with a puddle. Not just any puddle, but the king of all puddles, a vast, shimmering empire left by the overnight rain, stretching across the entire path to the park. Evie stopped dead, her little rain boots sinking into the gravel at its shore. She pointed a finger, dripping with the gravity of an explorer discovering a new ocean.
Why?
It wasn't her first why. For weeks, it had been a Gatling gun of curiosity. Why is the sky? Why is the dog? Why is the toast? Each one felt like a tiny, urgent exam for which I was perpetually unprepared. I'd scramble for answers, fumbling through half-remembered science and outright inventions. "Well, sweetie, evaporation and condensation, clouds." Her eyes would glaze over before I'd finished. My answers were dead ends, shutting down the conversation with the dull thud of a fact. But this puddle, this magnificent, reflective puddle under a clearing sky. I saw my tired face mirrored in its murky depths, and the third word arrived like a life raft. Guess. I didn't launch into the hydrological cycle. I knelt beside her, my knees soaking through my jeans, and gazed at the puddle with her. "Why?" she repeated, her world reduced to this one question and this one expanse of water. I grinned, a conspirator's grin. "I don't know," I confessed, and it felt like a relief. "But let's guess." Her eyebrows shot up. "Guess?" This was a new rule to the game. "I'll start," I said, tapping my chin. "I guess the moon got thirsty last night and drank too much starlight. It overflowed and made this puddle." A slow smile bloomed on her face. The demanding why softened into wonder. She stared at the puddle, then up at the washed blue sky. "No," she said decisively. Her small brow furrowed in thought. "I guess a giant cried. A happy giant. For a rainbow." "A happy cry," I echoed.
Yes.
"And look, there's the rainbow now." I pointed to the oily sheen of gasoline in one corner, refracting the light. We'd made it true. From that day, guess became our magic wand, transforming the relentless siege of why into a collaborative adventure. It was no longer a test of my knowledge, but an invitation to her imagination. In the grocery line, staring at the tabloid headline about a celebrity's pet pig. "Why, Mama?" "Guess why he is a pig." "Because the pig drives his car," she declared. "And orders pizza," I added. We spun a tale of a chauffeuring, pizza-loving pig until we were both giggling, the bored people around us smiling in spite of themselves. Guess gave her authority. It valued her logic, her strange and beautiful synaptic leaps, over textbook correctness. It said, "Your brain is a brilliant place, and I want to go exploring inside it." One night, a fierce summer thunderstorm rolled in. The lights flickered. A monstrous crack of thunder shook the windows. Evie shot up in bed, her face a pale moon in the dark. "Why?" she cried, the word now laced with fear. The old answer. "It's just air pressure, honey. was worse than useless. I gathered her shaking form against me and went to the window. "The sky is so loud tonight," I whispered against her hair. "Let's guess what's happening up there." "Monsters," she whimpered. "Maybe," I allowed. "But what kind?" "I guess they're not angry monsters. I guess they're bowling." "Bowling?" A tiny, intrigued voice.
Yeah.
"The lightning is the crash of the pins. And the rumble, that's the giant ball rolling down the alley of the clouds. Guess what they're bowling for?" She was silent for a long moment, watching the lightning flash. "For a birthday cake," she whispered. "The best birthday cake ever," I agreed. The storm didn't cease, but her terror did. It was transformed by the alchemy of guess into a story we were telling together. We weren't victims of a scary noise. We were commentators on a celestial sporting event. Guess didn't provide answers. It provided companionship in the mystery. It acknowledged that the universe is a weird and startling place, and that sometimes the bravest thing you can do in the face of the unanswerable is not to seek a single truth, but to build a wonderful, shared story. It taught me that curiosity isn't a demand for data, it's a request to play. And my daughter, I discovered, was the most imaginative playmate I'd ever had. 4. Together, the antidote to every no. The mutiny occurred at bath time. It wasn't a surprise. The bath had been slowly transforming from a joy-filled splash zone into a territorial standoff. My simple request, "Time for your bath," was no longer an invitation. It was a declaration of war. Tonight, the stage was set. The steamy, lavender-scented bathroom. The yellow rubber ducky poised on the rim. The tiny, defiant general standing rigid in the hallway, arms crossed over her dinosaur pajama top, which she had just put on backwards. "No," she stated. The word was flat, final, a stone wall. My usual tactics lined up in my mind. The bribe. "You can have an extra story." The threat. "Then no morning cartoons." The logical plea. "But you're sticky from dinner." They all tasted like ash. They were just different ways of scaling her wall, and I was tired of climbing. Then I felt it, the fourth word. Not a tool to break her will, but a key to a side door I hadn't seen. Together. I didn't move toward her. I didn't cajole. I sat down, right there on the hallway floor, my back against the wall. I let out a long, weary sigh, not for effect, but because I truly was weary. "You know," I said to the opposite wall, "baths are kind of lonely." She didn't uncross her arms, but one ear tilted toward me. "I just have to sit here on this hard stool and watch. It looks so fun in there, all those bubbles. But it's a solo mission." I looked at her then, a glint of conspiracy in my eye. "I have an idea. What if it wasn't a solo mission?" Her eyes narrowed, suspicious but hooked. "What if," I continued, my voice dropping to a whisper, "we did it together?" "You get in bath?" she asked, skepticism and wild hope battling in her tone. "Not me in your bath," I said. "But what if I had my own mission, right beside you?" I scrambled up, my energy shifting from opposition to alliance. "You conquer the bathtub pirates, and I will conquer the sink mountain stain." I gestured dramatically to the bathroom sink, which held a cup stained with berry juice. "We'll go into the bathroom together, do our jobs together, and when we're both done, we'll have a victory snuggle together. Deal?" The wall crumbled. Not all at once, but brick by brick. Her arms loosened. The no had been rendered obsolete because it was no longer her against me. It was us against the tasks of the evening. "Together," she said, testing the weight of the word. "Together," I confirmed, holding out my hand. She took it. The bath that night wasn't just a success. It was a party. I scrubbed at my fictitious stain with comical vigor while she narrated the ducky's pirate adventures. We were a team, synchronized in purpose, separated only by porcelain. Together became our most powerful spell against the tyranny of no. It reframed every looming conflict as a potential partnership. Leaving the playground wasn't a wrenching loss. It was a joint expedition. "Let's walk to the car together and see who can spot 3 red things first." Cleaning up toys wasn't a chore. It was a rescue operation. The blocks are lost in the carpet sea. Let's save them together and get them all home to the box before the tickle monster arrives. My greatest test of together came on a night when a true monster arrived. Not a bath time pirate, but the ancient, shapeless one that lived in her closet. Her cry was pure primal terror. "It's there." "There's no monster, honey," felt like a lie. To her, it was viscerally real. "I'll protect you," was better, but it still left her alone in the fear, with me as a distant guardian. So I chose coalition. I walked to the closet door, my own heart doing a silly little dance. I didn't open it immediately. I looked back at her, a small lump under the covers. "This seems like a two-person job," I said, my voice steady. "I don't think I should face it alone. Will you check it out with me? Together?" She peeked out. The idea was revolutionary. She wasn't a victim to be defended. She was a fellow warrior to be recruited. After a long moment, she slipped her hand into mine, her grip tight as a vice. We approached the door. We opened it together. We peered into the shadows, a united front. I reached in and shook her hanging dresses. "See," I whispered. "Just clothes." I think the monster heard we were coming together and decided to book it. "We're too brave for him." She exhaled, her whole body melting against me. The fear hadn't been argued away. It had been faced and dissolved by the simple, unshakable power of shared presence. Together didn't mean I solved her problems. It meant I ensured she would never, ever have to face them alone. It was the ultimate antidote, not to her no, but to the loneliness that so often fueled it. 5. Yes, the philosophy of the possible. The rebellion began with a purple crayon. It wasn't about paper. The pristine, printer paper white of the wall next to her little art table had issued a silent, irresistible challenge. A single, bold, violet line streaked upward from the baseboard, a declaration of color against the boring beige. I caught her mid-swipe, the crayon a guilty wand in her fist. My breath hitched. The landlord's voice about neutral tones and security deposits clashed in my head with the sheer, audacious joy on her face. Every parenting fiber screamed the script. "And oh, what did you do?" "We do not draw on walls." The word was a cannonball in my throat. But as I looked from her proud, shining eyes to that brave purple line, the fifth and final word rose, not to stop me, but to change the question entirely. "Yes." I knelt. My silence must have felt like judgment, because her joy was already crumbling into defiance. I pointed at the line. "Yes," I said, my voice quiet with awe. Her defiance faltered, replaced by pure confusion. "That," I said, tracing the air beside the purple streak, "is a magnificent line. It's so bold, so purple." She stared at me, waiting for the but. It never came. Instead, I asked, "What is it?"
She blinked.
"It's a road. For a snail." "A snail road," I breathed.
"Yes."
"Of course it is. But you know, snail roads, they need friends. Other roads. For beetles. And maybe a ladybug lane." I stood up, my mind racing. "The only problem is, this wall is the landlord's wall. But a snail road shouldn't be alone."
"So?"
"Yes." I marched to the closet, pulled out a giant, flattened cardboard box from a recent delivery, and hauled it into the living room. I taped it securely to the wall, right over the single purple line, creating a vast, blank, brown canvas. "Yes," I said, handing her the entire bucket of crayons. "Let's build the whole snail city." Her explosion of joy was atomic. This wasn't permission slipped through a loophole. It was a full-throated endorsement of her vision, with creative parameters. The yes wasn't to the crime. It was to the boundless creativity behind it. We spent the afternoon on our knees, mapping out a metropolis of wobbly roads, blobby parks, and a glorious, scribbled sun that looked vaguely like a frowning potato. The wall was safe. Her spirit was ecstatic. This became the philosophy of the strategic, boundless yes. It was the yes and of our lives. Before the knee-jerk no could escape, I started hunting for the hidden yes it was guarding. Mama, can I jump in that puddle? Yes, with your boots on. Let's see how big a splash a dinosaur can make. Can we have a picnic? Yes, and since it's raining, our picnic will be a fort under the kitchen table. Pass the goldfish crackers, explore. Can I wear my fairy wings to the store?
Yes.
And your fireman helmet, because you never know what a multidimensional errand might require. This yes was the most powerful word of all because it was a vote of confidence in her very soul. It said, your ideas are valid. Your joy is a priority. The world is not a series of stops, but a series of creative starts. It didn't mean chaos. It meant co-creation. It meant joining her on her side of the idea and figuring out a way to make it work instead of standing across from her as the immovable wall of no. The ultimate test came on a bleak, gray Tuesday. I was bone-tired, mentally scrolling through a list of adult worries. Evie, sensing the heaviness, climbed into my lap. She put her sticky hands on my cheeks. Mama, she said, her voice solemn. We need a parade. A parade. The effort of gathering noisemakers, of marching, of feigning cheer felt Herculean. My exhausted soul whispered no. But I looked into her earnest eyes, eyes that saw a sad mama and prescribed a parade. She wasn't asking for a toy. She was prescribing joy. Yes, I said, the word lifting some of the weight off my own chest. We absolutely need a parade. We didn't have horns. We had wooden spoons and a pot. We didn't have confetti. We had a bag of old cereal. We didn't have a route. We had a loop from the kitchen, through the living room, around the couch, and back. I banged the pot. She shook a Tupperware of dried pasta. We marched. We chanted nonsense. We threw handfuls of Cheerios like they were roses for an invisible crowd. It was ridiculous. It was sublime. 20 minutes later, breathless and sitting in a sprinkle of oat circles, she leaned against me. Good parade, Mama. The best, I whispered into her hair. The yes had transformed my own gloom. It acknowledged that sometimes the most mature, necessary thing you can do is to say yes to the ridiculous, yes to the messy, yes to the small, bright idea that fights back the gray. It built a child who saw solutions instead of obstacles, and in doing so, it rebuilt me as a mother who could once again see the possible instead of just the problematic. It was the word that turned walls into canvases and weary Tuesdays into parades. 6. The collision, when the 5 words met the ultimate test. The loss was absolute, and it happened in the space between the swing and the slide. Bun Bun wasn't just a stuffed animal. He was a rabbit of indeterminate species, one ear permanently bent from being clutched in toddler sleep, his gray fur matted with love and apple juice. He was Evie's silent witness, her confessor, the soft, steadying weight against her cheek during every new and frightening thing. We were packing up to leave the playground, the usual dance of gathering sippy cups and wiping sandy hands. Bun Bun's turn on the swing. Evie had announced solemnly 5 minutes prior, placing him carefully on the baby bucket seat. In the flurry of departure, in my focus on zipping jackets and checking for forgotten shoes, I forgot to unstrap him. We were halfway home, the car filled with the quiet hum of exhaustion, when a small, panicked voice pierced the calm from the back seat.
Mama.
Bun Bun's not. My heart stopped. I checked the empty seat beside her car seat. I saw the phantom shape of him on the swing, clear as daylight. A cold dread, far deeper than the situation warranted, poured through me. This wasn't a misplaced toy. This was a bereavement. I made a frantic U-turn. We raced back to the emptying park. The swing was empty, gently swaying in the dusk. Bun Bun was gone. Her grief was not the loud, dramatic tempest of a denied toy. It was a silent, total eclipse of the soul. She stood on the wood chips, her whole small body caving in on itself. She didn't cry. She just dimmed. My I love you fell into the void between us, meaningless as rain on a stone. My assurances that we'd find him rang hollow. Platitudes were insults to this magnitude of loss. In the face of this small, profound despair, The 5 words felt like paper shields. But they were all I had. I had to use them, not as tricks, but as a ladder down into the dark well where she'd fallen. I got down on my knees in the wood chips, bringing myself to her level. "Look," I said, my voice low and steady, pointing not at the empty swing, but at the ground beneath it. "Look right here. This is where we saw him last. Can you help me look for clues?" The words were a rope tossed into the void. She didn't grab it, but she blinked, her gaze slowly moving to where I pointed. A single, tiny thread of gray fuzz was caught on the swing's chain. "Evidence. Look," she whispered, pointing a trembling finger. "A clue." She was back just a little. "We became detectives of loss." "Guess," I said, as we scoured the perimeter. "Guess where a brave rabbit, waiting for his girl, might hop to keep safe?" She swallowed a sob. "Under the slide," she offered, her voice a frayed thread. We checked. Nothing. The hope she'd momentarily held crumbled. Her face dissolved, the silent tears finally coming in a hot, quiet stream. It was the most heartbreaking sound I'd ever heard, her grief, finally audible. I took her small, cold hands in mine. I didn't say it would be okay. I didn't promise a replacement. I made a covenant of presence. Together, I said, the words solid as an oak. We will look for him together. And if we don't find him tonight, we will be sad about it together. You are not alone in this. But it was the final word that had to do the heaviest lifting. As we walked back to the car, bunless, her little shoulders shaking with silent sobs, I knew a pivot was coming from investigation to mourning. I stopped, turned her to face me, and cupped her wet cheeks. "Yes," I said firmly. She looked up, utterly lost. "Yes, this is so sad. Yes, your heart is broken. Yes, you miss him terribly." I was validating the storm, not trying to stop it. "And yes, we can hold that sadness. We can make a picture for him when we get home. Yes, we can tell stories about his adventures. Yes, we can be sad and still have dinner. Yes to all of it." The yes didn't bring Bun back. It did something else. It made space for the catastrophe. It removed the pressure to be okay. It granted permission for the world to be shattered and assured her that even in the ruins, I would be there, saying yes to her right to feel every terrible piece of it. We didn't find him that night. We built a little shrine with his favorite blanket. We drew pictures of him riding on a friendly dog's back or floating away on a balloon to have an adventure. The yes allowed us to move from desperate searching to creative grieving. A week later, a small, careworn package arrived in the mail. The janitor had found him, cleaned him up, and sent him home with a note written in shaky cursive. This brave fellow said he got on quite an adventure, but all he really wanted was to get back to his girl. He's a good traveler, but he missed you something fierce. When I placed him in her arms, she didn't squeal. She buried her face in his fur, inhaled deeply, and sighed, a sound of a universe clicking back into place. Then she looked at me, her eyes old with a newly earned wisdom.
"He came home," she said.
"He did," I replied. "And you know what? We were okay while he was gone because we had each other." She nodded, holding Bun close. The 5 words hadn't solved the crisis. They couldn't prevent loss. But they had built a lifeboat sturdy enough to keep us afloat in the deepest, coldest waters. They had taught us that some things can't be fixed, only carried, and that the best way to carry a heavy thing is together, with a yes in your heart for the journey. 7. The Whisperer's Secret. It was never about the words. The revelation came not in a storm of toddler emotion, but in a supermarket aisle, under the humming fluorescence of the dairy section. Evie was 7. The dinosaur pajamas were long outgrown, replaced by leggings patterned with planets. We were debating the profound cosmological importance of string cheese versus yogurt tubes when I saw her, the woman from Moonbeam Toys. The lavender cardigan was gone, replaced by a simple raincoat, but the eyes were the same. Calm, knowing, a well of quiet perception. She was examining a container of oat milk, her cart a solitary island in the sea of cold cases. My breath caught. 5 years had passed since that day of the glittery unicorn horn and the whispered words that changed everything. Evie, sensing my shift, followed my gaze. "Who's that, Mama?" "A teacher," I said softly, the truth of the words settling in my bones. "Wait here 1 second." I walked over, my heart thumping a ridiculous rhythm. She looked up as I approached, and for a moment, there was no recognition. Then, her eyes crinkled at the corners. "The toy store," she said, her voice still a whisper, but one that carried. "Yes." The word felt insufficient. You probably don't remember.
But you said something to me that day.
5 words. She smiled, a slow sunrise of a smile. "Let me help you, please." A shiver went through me. She remembered the exact phrase. Those words, I stammered, the weight of half a decade of gratitude pressing down. They changed everything for us. I used them. I built a whole philosophy out of them. Look, help,
Guess.
together. Yes. You gave me the keys to the kingdom. I expected a smile of pride, a nod of confirmation. Instead, her smile deepened into something gentler, more compassionate. She reached out and placed a light, papery hand on my arm. "Oh, my dear," she said. "I didn't give you the keys." I blinked, confused. "But the words were just the address," she said, her eyes holding mine with a profound intensity. "You had to make the journey. The power was never in the syllables. It was in the shift they forced in you." The noisy supermarket seemed to fall silent. The hum of the coolers faded to a distant sea. "Think," she urged gently. "Look forced you to slow down, to truly see the world through her eyes, not just direct her gaze. Help forced you to surrender your need for control and efficiency, to admit your need for her. Guess forced you to value her imagination over your own knowledge, to become a student again. Together, forced you off your pedestal of authority and into the trenches of partnership. Yes, forced you to choose connection, creativity, and joy over convenience and fear." She squeezed my arm. "I didn't give you tricks to manage a toddler. I gave you a mirror." The words were just the polish on the glass. You had to be brave enough to look into it and to change what you saw looking back. It was like the final tumbler in a lock falling into place. I had been so proud of my linguistic toolkit, my clever parenting hacks. I'd missed the point entirely. The words weren't a script for her. They were a discipline for me. They weren't about getting her to behave. They were about training myself to be with her. "They translated your love from a noun into a verb," she said, as if reading my mind. "From a static feeling, 'I love you,' into a dynamic, participatory state of being. They said, 'I see you. I need you. I wonder with you. I am with you. I believe in you.' That's the language a soul understands." I was speechless, tears prickling the corners of my eyes. She released my arm and gave a small, final nod. "You did the work. You made the journey. That little girl over there," she said, glancing at Evie, who is now carefully comparing cheese slices, "she's not just well-behaved. She is seen. And that is everything." She wheeled her cart away, disappearing around a pyramid of yogurt cups as quietly as she'd arrived. I stood there, rooted to the spot, the fluorescent light feeling suddenly holy. I turned to look at my daughter, my lanky, planet-legged, string cheese philosopher. She looked up and caught me staring. "Mama," she asked, "you okay?" I didn't use one of the 5 words. I didn't need to. They had done their job so thoroughly they had worked themselves out of a job. They were the training wheels, and I was now riding on the steady, silent balance of the thing they had built. A connection. I walked back to her, my step sure. "Yeah," I said, my voice thick. "I'm perfect. So, what's the cosmic verdict? Cheese or yogurt?" She held up the string cheese with a solemn flourish. "This one has a better gravitational pull for my lunchbox." I laughed, the sound echoing in the cold aisle. I put the cheese in the cart. As we walked toward the checkout, her hand, now so much bigger but still fitting perfectly, slipped into mine. The most powerful words to say to a toddler were never about control. They were about surrender. They weren't a way to build a better child. They were the blueprint for becoming the parent that child needed you to be. And once you learned that language, the language of shared attention, invited capability, collaborative wonder, unwavering alliance, and boundless possibility, you realized it wasn't toddler speak at all. It was the mother tongue of love itself. And once fluent, you could speak it forever, even in the silence.